The moon is made of green cheese. Or, what would it matter if it was? It's a very traditional saying in English. I actually looked it up and it goes right back to the 16th century. The moon is made of green cheese. Traditional, but what if it actually was? What difference would that make right here, right now, in your life, my life with my partner, with the people that I meet in the street, with our politics, with whatever? You know, of course they'd have to rewrite physics and, but really, what difference would it make to us? It's out there, up there, nothing to do with right here, right now. So the question really is, we've been talking about emptiness, we've been talking about the ultimate and the conditioned, the ultimate and the conventional, the two truths. Is that just clever stuff, ideas? Or does it really make a real difference to me and you and the way we experience the world right here, right now? Clearly, if scientists did suddenly decide the moon is made of green cheese, well, there's no real adjustments to my life that I need to make. And yet we talk about Zen as, literally, the great matter of life and death. And this is life. And we know that death is equally always with us. So is this just about ideas? Ideas which are something separate. Ideas which I can stand back from and hold in my hand and say, yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree. Keep them at a distance like that. I would hope, I would strongly suggest that they're not. What we've been talking about, really, we can sum up in this idea of not separate, which is not one, not two, because things are real, things exist, but not quite in the way that we think that we do. And the way that we think that they do actually alters how we respond, how we see, how we actually live our lives. That's why this is important, because I do mean how we see. The Heart Sutra itself reminds us there's no separate seeing. Seeing, feeling, thinking are all intimately connected. What I think of as out there, the organs of my sight, or equally hearing, tasting, touching, whatever, and what's going on is what I think of in here, are not separate. They're all intimately related, and what I think of as a simple seeing what's out there is this tremendously rich, involved interaction. And that's at the absolutely simplest level, because this thing, which is not one, because there's a me, there's a you, there's my eye, there's seeing, there's my thinking that's going on, but at the same time not two. These things aren't entirely separate. They exist only as and in relationship, in connection. They have no separate identities, and that's really the whole teaching of the Heart Sutra, the whole teaching of emptiness, the whole teaching of the two truths. No absolute truth, only ever a relational truth. And so we can go through just thinking quickly, and the merest sketch. I am not one, I am many. We can think of this in so many terms: past, future, the different roles I play. Yes, but the different, what should I call them? The different energies, the different sub-personalities, the different sets of conditions that I really am, depending on my context, where I am, who I'm with, how I'm feeling, what's happening around me. I'm not one. I'm not two separate things. I'm not a number of completely divided, dissociated identities, but I'm not one thing. And you too, you're obviously exactly the same. And our relationship is, if it is a relationship, ever changing, ever capable of renewal, difference. What we thought was simple and that we were the same, we find we're so different. Where we thought there was difference, we suddenly find community, sharedness, continuity, sameness. Not one, not two, and so with the rest of the world. We share this difference, we share this sameness. So when I actually look at you out there, how do I see you? And that's the same whether, we're on Zoom, whether I meet you in the street or in a shop, or whether I wake up every morning beside you. It's the same basic question of relationship. What happens? What can happen? Do I see you? Literally see, but experience you as something separate? In which case, two. No, not two, because for all the reasons that we discuss, we're not separate in that sense. So are we all the same? You must think that the way that I do. Obviously, if you're my loved one, that's a common mistake we all make. Of course you must think what I do. Of course you must think what I want, but no. Or, well, of course, men like us have these attitudes. Well, no. There's difference here. There's strangeness. There's newness always. Or always that possibility. So, not one, not two. That's why the precepts ask us to always think of others, approach each other's, meet each other's, whether that's somebody I know really well or whether we're meeting for the first time, with openness and possibility, rather than thinking I know, because knowing in this sense is closure. Not knowing is openness to the possibility, the future. And in some senses, openness is actually quite a good translation for emptiness. It's possibility. As I've mentioned on a number of occasions, Kaz Tanahashi translates emptiness as boundlessness. Actually, I think openness is quite good as well. So what this idea of the emptiness of emptiness, that everything is relational, everything is relative, everything is conditioned, caused, able to change, impermanent as we say, but that's the condition for growth as well as decay. Possibility requires that things are flexible, changeable, that when we meet, we don't know what's going to happen. Anything could happen. Anything could happen in the next half hour. Anything could happen in the next 10 seconds. But beyond that, or as part of that, as exactly the same thing as that in actual fact, it means us to ask to behold that there can be no final ground, no final absolute, no final universal, no final elsewhere to go, no final future, heaven, whatever to look forward to, no elsewhere, no else when, no else how. This is this moment, the next moment will be this, and so on. So whatever idea we have, well, of whatever really, of God, no final notion. Of Buddha, obviously we're told if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Why? Well, because that Buddha is my knowing, my fixed idea, my closure of the Buddha. So no final religion, no ultimate truth, no great leader, no political party that has the answer, that has the final finished deal. What about science and technology? Well, of course, wonderful things, great truth, but in a sense we need to have that kind of situational quality that those much maligned predecessors of ours, the Luddites, had, who were not anti-technology, not anti-science. They merely objected to being put out of work through the inappropriate application of technology. Technology won't save us. It allows us to do marvellous things. It enables us to talk across continents, between countries on Zoom. But it's not the answer, and just because very clever people can organise very clever things, that doesn't mean that that's the answer, the ground on which we can stand either. And of course we say that the idea of emptiness itself is empty. Because if it weren't, it would provide exactly that certainty, exactly that final ground. No, that's real. You can rely on that. Well, you can't. We have to remain open. We have to understand that openness is the nature of the universe, the nature of reality. And the problems start arising when we forget that, when we don't want to face that, when it's more convenient to ignore that, when it's frightening to own that, when it seems comforting not to own that. And so we can talk about how this shows up as our own psychology, and how the very idea of emptiness means that we must question that. We must question our seemingly ever-present demand for control and the fear that generates that demand for control, or when others demand to control, demand that beyond all else and above all else they're right. And we need to realise that too, our fundamental ideas of the relations between persons are empty in the sense of conventional. What of, as I say, control, our my autonomy, my I will decide, or my responsibility. You did that, you are responsible. What about these ideas? Well, emptiness requires that we understand that these are real but relative. There's no final, infinite, transcendental me to pin that on. There's no final ultimate transcendental me to say, no, I want this. Well, this I wants this at this moment, or thinks it wants it, and thinks there's a thing to want. But equally, when we hear talk of no self, no doer and no deed, well, yes, at the ultimate level that's absolutely true, but that doesn't stop. You know, if you come up and punch me in the face, the blood runs down my nose and I will probably get angry. That's real, that's equally real, but it's not ultimately real. But it's as real as it will ever get. And our suffering is real. And we should never dismiss that. We should never want to disallow that in favour of some fantasy of some ultimate, whether that's an ultimately good me or an ultimately benevolent world or whatever. It's real. It hurts. And being open hurts. This is where we come back to life as it is, the only teacher. Why does it teach us? Because it hurts, because there is a resistance to the lessons of life. If our suffering weren't empty, though, we could never change it if it were just there like a lump of rock. It might be tempting to think that I could pick it up and throw it away. That it's nothing to do with me. I can pick it up and throw it away. But no, I and my suffering are not separate. What does that mean? But because both I and my suffering are empty, it means I can work with it. I can change it. I can learn from it. I can grow through it. So I think because we share this reality of being suffering beings, suffering because embodied beings. And to be embodied, to have a body, is to be relational. It is to be subject to suffering. It doesn't do what I want. What I think I want. And you see, at once I'm beginning to separate out me, my body. Ha! Rubbish. But that's what it is to be these strange, suffering creatures. So nothing final, nothing absolute. We just live out the great matter of life and death as openly as we're able. This is the teaching of emptiness. This is the teaching of the two truths. This is the teaching of not separate. Here, now. Not in some abstract, ineffable whatever I'm pointing to, but this body, this flesh, these thoughts, these words. Enlightenment or garbage. What it is.